Legacy characters in comics. Time and time again, we see that a specific character is so massive, so important to their specific universe, their specific city that they are dedicated to saving, that they do end up leaving behind a legacy that is later picked up by someone else, whether that's them passing the mantle on to said character, or someone just in the future taking up the mantle after a character's death, disappearance, or maybe even they went down a dark path, like a lot of times happens in the Green Lantern story, for example, and Hal Jordan does become Parallax. However, one of the most interesting instances of this, and of a legacy character in my opinion, is given to us by the DCAU. And now, if any of you have followed me on TikTok or YouTube for any amount of time, you will know that I praise the DCAU more than any other superhero universe out there. And that is because I truly do believe that they do virtually everything correct, and they give us such amazing stories, but also such amazing characters. And to me, one of the best examples of that is a legacy character. And that character I'm talking about is Terry McGinnis. Batman Beyond. Yes, a character created specifically for animation. A character that became so popular that they did then make him into a regular comic book character. And he did start to appear in even other projects across animation. And although we did get to see his story fulfilled through the medium of Justice League Unlimited, there is still a lot that we do not know. And even though season 3 somewhat wrapped everything up, there were still a lot of storylines, a lot of villains, and a lot of things that we just did not get to see fleshed out. Now, there are some real world reasons behind this, one of which being they did not want two shows on at the same time that were centered around Batman, this being Batman Beyond and Justice League, which all in all, I do agree with the sentiment behind that. However, I personally don't think that this oversaturation that they would be talking about in this instance would be an inherent bad thing, because Batman Beyond is about Terry McGinnis, and yes, Bruce Wayne is there, but still it's not centered around him. He is not the focus of that story. And even you could argue Justice League, although I say he is the main hero of the whole DCAU, including Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, you could also argue that there are other characters that do get their chance to shine in both of those shows. So for that to be the reason that Batman Beyond stopped is a huge shame, especially when you consider how many stories we do have left to be told. And we actually get teased with what some of those stories could have been and could have looked like when we do see Terry McGinnis appear in different episodes throughout Justice League Unlimited. And with that being said, that is why today we're talking Batman Beyond Season 4, What Could Have Been. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Batman Beyond Season 4. As I mentioned, we did get teased with some of what this could have looked like, could have been different storylines that could have been explored, and first and foremost, I want to touch on those key points, and then branch off of what the original series did show us, and what characters still need their stories, in my opinion, to be wrapped up. And I do believe that this could be a series that got not only a 4th season, 5th season, so on and so forth. But with that being said, I'm going to start out with, like I mentioned before, some of the things we were already teased with, and one of which is him joining the Justice League. Now, I know in the original series, they did tease Batman Beyond joining the Justice League. However, if you remember correctly, he did turn down that offer, and he did want to focus more on Gotham, and they did have that really cool exchange between Terry McGinnis, Bruce, and Superman, where Bruce almost gives Terry a nod, as in, yeah, that's exactly what I did, because if you remember correctly, Batman was always a temporary part-timer that he would always say, and he always used this as a way to not fully go along with whatever decision the Justice League made. That being said, I feel like this Batman Beyond, he is more so shown to be a part of the Justice League, especially when we do see him in Justice League Unlimited. So I think it would be really cool just to see him fighting alongside those heroes, specifically Static Shock. I would want to see Terry McGinnis and Static Shock have a really good relationship, not only because I really enjoy the character of Static Shock, but because Batman, Bruce Bruce Wayne was a big mentor for Virgil. So now to see those roles reversed and to see Virgil in that mentor role would be really, really cool. And maybe he shows Terry a few things about how to navigate being a hero. Terry has Bruce, yes, but looking at another person, at another person's perspective in these type of situations could add a lot of nuance to Terry's character. And that's something that I would really love to see explored if they were to do a season 4 of Batman Beyond. Now, another thing we do have to note is that Terry's time in the League would eventually come to an end. We do know this because of the episode titled Epilogue in Justice League Unlimited, and it shows Terry McGinnis quitting the Justice League, and this is when he starts to go down a bit of a downward spiral, not really knowing who he is, struggling with his identity when he finds out he's essentially a clone of Bruce Wayne, but also not a clone of Bruce Wayne, more so a son of Bruce Wayne, because only Bruce's reproductive system was cloned. It was an actual direct clone from Bruce Wayne. However, you can still see how this drastically affects Terry and him not wanting to be in the Justice League. Similar to the original Batman, he wanted to relieve himself from anything associated with the Justice League or being like the old version of Batman. So instead of being a part-timer or a full-timer, he was just going to totally resign and do things on his own. And I feel like watching him go down this journey would have been really cool to see, seeing the different dynamics, especially like I mentioned before, that conversation he would have with Static once he does end up deciding to leave, and maybe Virgil understands, maybe Virgil tries a couple of times to reach out to him, and then we do inevitably see that it just does not work and Virgil does respect him, because to me Static Shock is one of the most understanding characters that we have, so I don't feel like he would go overboard in trying to push Terry McGinnis back to joining the Justice League, especially if Terry shares with him the reasons why he left. Again, I feel like if he found out that Terry McGinnis was essentially a clone, or at the very least a son of Batman type of figure, he would 100% understand and empathize with his situation. That being said, one of the other things that we are teased with in Justice League Unlimited is the relationship between Terry McGinnis and Dana. Now, it is revealed that Dana does know Terry McGinnis is Batman. However, we never get it revealed how she finds out, when she finds out, or anything like that. So that's another storyline I would like to explore, even if it's through the medium of flashbacks, because I feel like the best case scenario for this season 4 would be to pick up after the epilogue episode, after a lot of those revelations have occurred and we get to see Terry McGinnis go down this new path. That being said, flashbacks would offer us the perfect medium to see him joining the League, quitting the League, the aftermath of him quitting the League, and then also Dana finding out that he is Batman. Their relationship, we obviously do know that he tried to end their relationship in Justice League Unlimited because of everything that happened. However, I feel like once he does accept Bruce a little bit more, maybe not so much as a father, but just as a mentor figure, and understanding that being the situation doesn't inherently change the relationship he had with his father growing up. And I feel like watching him come to terms with all of this would be really cool to see happen on screen, and it would give him so much character development that we would watch him grow so much, not as just a hero, but also as a person. And I always think that superhero shows do it best when they show growth not only in the hero, but in the person behind the mask, because it's realistically a melding of two different characters a lot of the times, especially when you're talking about such a character as Bat. So I feel like getting to explore their relationship just a little bit would be really, really interesting, and just seeing how they go about the day-to-day, you could see the similarities between Bruce Wayne and his past relationships, but also see nuance and see some differences between those relationships and how different things play out. I feel like Terry is a little bit more understanding, but also a little bit more headstrong in the moment, so that could lead to some big misunderstandings, or also lead to him maybe opening up when Bruce wouldn't have about certain things regarding Batman. But that being said, some of the other things that I really, really would want them to go down would be to explore some things that we had left off from the original series. And to me, the biggest missed opportunity from the original series happened in season 1, and it is revolving around the character of Blight. Yes, the person who was responsible for the death of Terry's father, or at the very least adoptive father, considering Bruce is technically biological father, but you get the point. He was the person that was responsible for Warren McGinnis's death. And if you remember correctly, Blight is never apprehended. He's never stopped. He's never killed. He is just out there. Paxton Powers remains in power of Wayne Powers, and yes, he becomes under some scrutiny, some heat because of some stupid decisions he makes throughout the season. However, it is still teased from Batman Beyond to him that this character is now just out there, and he has a vendetta now against Paxton. But you know who else he has a vendetta against? Batman, because Batman is to him the person who caused everything to happen. He's the person who caused that original nerve toxin to explode. Now again, Derek Powers was the one there, and he was the one doing illegal activities, so was it really his fault? No, it wasn't Batman's fault, but in the mind of a criminal, yes, if Batman wasn't there, that wouldn't have happened, so you could understand how this would help to create a huge vendetta for Batman. So the fact that we never got any resolution for that was always one of my biggest disappointments from the original series. Again, that's not me saying I didn't enjoy the series or it was bad. I loved it. I thought it was great. I just feel like adding a ribbon to tie everything up would have been really, really well done. And I think a lot of fans would have enjoyed a lot of the full circle moments. So to me, I feel like one of the biggest things you could do with a season 4 is bringing Blight back. However, bringing him back in a capacity where he is an overarching villain for the entire season, and maybe not even have him face off against Batman until towards the end of the season. Maybe he just does some pretty extreme things and some pretty irreparable things. And honestly, one of those things, and this is just something that I would want to see in this season, and that would be somehow causing the death of Bruce Wayne. And yes, I know that would make fans' hearts ache, mine included. To see Kevin Conroy's version of Bruce Wayne actually die would break hearts. But again, I feel like a lot of times that is a good thing. It was a good thing for us fans to feel sorrow. We have gone on adventures with this character of Kevin Conroy's Batman since the 90s. From Batman the Animated Series to New Adventures of Batman to Superman to Static Shock, Justice League Unlimited. He has been the pillar character. So to see him finally come to his demise would really bring us full circle and could honestly serve to a really beautiful moment and a lot of really touching moments as well. And by that I mean you don't necessarily need to have Blight just totally off him. I actually don't think a violent death like that would resonate that well with fans. I think you could inevitably piss them off. However, in the same respect, I feel like having him die of just old age could also piss some people off, because a lot of them would want their Batman in his final moments to be doing something. So to me, I feel like the best way to do this would be to have him die at the hands of Blight, however, in somewhat of an indirect way. And I feel like I'm going to go to video games here for a second. And to me, the best way you could handle this is how Spider-Man PS4 handled the death of Aunt May. And by that, I mean, if you have Bruce Wayne at some type of event, some type of charity auction, maybe he's doing something for Wayne Powers Industries. Maybe they're honoring how old Bruce is and how he dedicated so much of his life to this company. Again, these are very feasible things that would happen in the Batman universe. So they all would make sense to get Batman, Bruce, the Recluse, a little bit of rhyming there, out of Wayne Manor and into the public eye. Because again, as he's gotten older, he wants to be out less and less. However, something like this, if it's honoring his company, especially the company that his parents did build, he is 9 out of 10 times going to do it. So this would bring him out of his seclusion, and you could have him at this event, and then all of a sudden Blight does return. He releases maybe some form of that nerve toxin that originally infected him, that he needed drastic radiation just to heal from, that did then turn him into Blight. You could have him infect all these people. Bruce, maybe still in his old age, is capable enough to get a lot of the people out of there. However, in doing so, he is himself infected to the point where he doesn't really have any hope, whereas everyone else still does have some hope, anyone that was infected anyway. And this would do two things really well. First and foremost, it would give us a chance to not have to see one of our childhood heroes just get absolutely murdered on screen, but it would also give him a real heroic last send-off. In his final moments, even in his old age, he is able to save people. He puts their lives above his own, and in doing so, he seals his own fate. However, if you remember correctly, I did mention I'm going to dive a little bit into video games here for this, and I'm not done, because I think the best thing you can do with this specific situation is have Terry find some sort of cure, and he has to decide whether to cure a large majority of people, maybe the greater crowd that was affected and just had minor effects. They need a smaller dose, so whatever he acquired would be enough for them. However, it wouldn't be enough for Bruce, so he has to make a choice to save all of those people or to save Bruce, his father, his mentor, the first Batman. And then you could get a great exchange of dialogue, because I really don't think Terry would sacrifice all those people for Bruce Wayne. However, it would at least be a struggle for him. But to see Bruce Wayne in that moment look to Terry and say, they're what matter, those people matter, my life is already forfeit. I have lived way longer than I should have by this point. I've been willing to sacrifice myself for the last 50, 60 years. And to see a moment like that between two generations of Batman would be spectacular. And I think it would, at the very least, help to render any complaints people would have about killing off Bruce Wayne a moot point for that. And honestly, I feel like that would lead to a lot of people who might even be upset about just the decision alone to kill off Bruce Wayne, to at least acknowledge how beautiful a moment that could be between two iconic characters. And yes, Terry McGinnis by this point to me is an iconic character. I mean, he was created in animation and then got his own comic runs and has been a pretty popular character. Not as popular as Batman, obviously, but still popular in his own right. So that being said, to see these two characters on screen sharing a moment like that, especially a moment of death, sacrifice, would be absolutely spectacular. I think a lot of the fans would really, really love it. However, that's not all, because I feel like if you do this, it could lead us to an interaction that we have needed between Terry McGinnis and another character since the beginning of Batman Beyond. And why this character was never shown always somewhat pissed me off, partially because he is my favorite DC character, but also partially because there were a lot of different storylines where him appearing would have at the very least made sense. And I feel like after the death of Bruce Wayne, this character showing up would make the most sense. And that character I'm talking about, yes, if you look at my shirt, it is Nightwing, Dick Grayson. Now, we did get him teased in several episodes and even the movie of Batman Beyond. Barbara Gordon does mention him, and then there's a moment where Terry McGinnis does grab an old jacket and it says DG, it's Dick Grayson. And then we do have that cool moment where he does put on Dick Grayson's mask when the bat suit is malfunctioning, so he has to go stop it without the suit, and proves that he is Batman even without the suit. However, that being said, we never got an actual direct interaction between Terry McGinnis and Dick Grayson. So I feel like with the death of Bruce Wayne, this could offer the perfect opportunity for him to go seek out Nightwing. Maybe talk to him about everything that's happened, everything that happened with Cadmus, everything that Terry found out in the epilogue episode, and everything that's transpired between him and Bruce, not only just as Batman Beyond, but also in their personal lives. Him losing that mentor figure. That's something that Nightwing, above most other people, would understand. So I feel like getting to see the two of them connect over this and over this loss would be really cool. However, not only that, I feel like because by this point, Nightwing would be in his older age. However, he would probably be about 65. So to say that he could maybe suit up one last time isn't the craziest thing. I mean, Bruce was putting on bat suits in his 80s. So it would make sense to see Nightwing don his outfit again, become Nightwing once again, and fight side by side with Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond, the next generation of the dynamic duo. However, in this instance, Nightwing would be the more mentor figure, with Batman actually being the sidekick-esque character, which would be a really cool switch up from what we're traditionally used to, because it's traditionally Batman and Robin. So it being Nightwing and Batman would be a really cool switch up on that, and just seeing the different storylines that we could get with those two characters together, having to take down Blight, and then having Terry McGinnis have to stand face to face with the person that not only killed his father in Bruce Wayne, but also killed his adoptive father, the person he thought was his father for his whole life, life, Warren McGinnis. This person took arguably more than anyone has ever took from Terry McGinnis, and he is now right in front of him. He is stopped, and maybe, just maybe, he considers killing him. He considers crossing that line. Then you can have an amazing exchange of dialogue between Nightwing and Batman about why Bruce never killed, why Bruce never crossed that line. Maybe there were instances where he came close, but Nightwing pulled him back. Or maybe there were even instances like Tony Zuko where Robin / Nightwing almost crossed the line. But right there was Bruce to remind him why they can't do that and why it's so important that they don't cross that line. However, those are just some of the storylines that I think would be really, really cool to see unfold in this season if we ever did get a season 4. But let me know what all of you guys think in the comments below. Which of these storylines do you think would have been coolest to see on screen? Do you think killing off Bruce Wayne, even though he's in his 90s, would be a mistake, or would that break the internet? Again, let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.